All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here for this MSP lecture series. I want to thank MSP for allowing us to be here tonight, and thank you all for tuning in to learn about some positive activism strategies in the professional world. We're really excited to be here with you live on YouTube, and I will take a moment and introduce myself first. My name is Brianna Bennett. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a UGA Career Consultant in the Career Center.
Hi everyone, my name is Destiny Loyd. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm so glad to be here with you all tonight. I serve as the program coordinator for the UGA Mentor Program.
Before we get started in our content tonight, we actually want to take a second and just acknowledge a little bit about what's going on in our nation. So as you'll notice, what we're talking about tonight is what we consider positive activism strategies for a professional setting. As we're going through, we do want to make sure that it is clear our strategies that we are sharing tonight by no means diminish or, take space away from other types of protesting, challenging, and dissenting that you may feel are important for the activism work that you are deciding to do in the future. We also want to make sure that we talk about how diverse UGA students are and how many different perspectives, experiences, and skills and backgrounds are coming to our audience tonight. One thing we do know that we hear consistently from UGA students, and a little bit about why we're here tonight, we hear so often that you really want to make a change in this world. You want to leave UGA, you want to make a difference, and tonight we're going to take you through about a 6-step process for identifying and enacting the change on your journey to becoming an effective advocate and activist in any professional setting you might find yourself in.
So before we get started, I do want us to be on the same page when it comes to defining positive activism and advocacy. So activism is simply taking action to affect social change, and it often deals with how to change the world. So that could be done socially, politically, economically, or environmentally. And advocacy is all about public support for a particular cause or recommendation of a particular policy. But when we talk about positive activism, we're actually looking at conducting change in a way that is conducive but not divisive, but rather brings people together despite their differences to be able to work on taking action and create change for the betterment of society. So we first want to start with a story. And you may be familiar with this story. It's a story about Mahatma Gandhi and his efforts to convince British colonial rule to be ended in India. But before that time, Gandhi fought for the rights of Indians in South Africa. This brought him straight into contact with the head of the Transvaal government, General John Smuts. So the story goes that when they met, Gandhi quietly told the general, "I've come to tell you something. I'm here to fight against your government."
General Smuts was laughing and said, "Oh, really? Do you have anything else to tell me?"
"Yes," said Gandhi. "I'm going to prevail."
Smuts was astonished. "How are you going to do that?"
Gandhi smiled and replied, "With your help." We hope that today we can empower you by providing you with the tools and skills that will help you accomplish and do what Gandhi did. Use positive activism and advocacy to change the minds and the hearts of those who disagree with you or even oppose you. We know that if you identify as a person of color or a minority, you have not traditionally had a seat at the table where decisions and policies are made that shape your livelihood, the livelihoods of Black, Latinx, Asian, Pacific Islander, Hawaiian, Arab, and Indigenous peoples. And that is why many of the systems we work, live, and play through today do not serve the global majority. You have not been a part of creating the laws and institutions that are the foundation of this society. But today, I hope you realize you should, you can, and will have a seat at the table.
We want to encourage each of you to begin by thinking a little bit about your past, okay? Identify one time in your life when you have already known that you've spoken up and you have enacted change. Think about the details surrounding that event. Where were you? Who were you with? What were you saying and what were you doing? Next, take a few moments and think towards your future. Think about the remainder of your time here at the University of Georgia. Destiny and I want to challenge each of you right now to think about and identify one singular positive change you would like to make before you graduate. This change can be big or small. It can happen in an academic setting, in a student organization setting, even in a campus community setting. Once you've thought about this change and identified it, go ahead and write it down. Try to make sure it's one sentence or less. After that, think about on a scale of 1 to 10, how empowered do you feel to make this change right at this moment? On this scale, a 1 would be kind of a low level of empowerment, and a 10 would be a really high level of empowerment. We've asked you to reflect on these things because we're sure many of you have thought to yourselves, what can I do? I know I've been in that situation. Destiny and I have talked about us kind of both feeling the same way. And we really want to make sure we know you are eager to do anything to change our systems and make the world better. You may have already accomplished a few things that already exemplify that power. Tonight we want to outline for you that 6-step process with tangible tools to begin working towards the change that you have identified. If you've interacted with the UGA Career Center before, hopefully you've noticed or seen that we do our best to offer or help students create really tangible, really action-focused items to move towards their goal. And that's our goal tonight for you as well. After each step is explained, we will prompt you to spend about 30 seconds to a minute brainstorming what each step is going to look like for the change that you have identified. During this time, we really want you to focus on visualizing the ideal outcome. Think about your environment, think about your surroundings, your thoughts, and your actions. At the end of our time together, you'll have created your own complete and individualized activism plan to employ.
All right, so we're going to get started with those steps. And step number 1 is to learn to do your research. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a UGA grad, and this here is me during my freshman year at UGA. Coming into college, I wasn't certain about my path. After high school, all I knew was that I wanted to study something that would allow me to create global scale change. So I figured international affairs would probably be the best way to go, thinking maybe I could serve as an ambassador for the US, and that's how I was going to make a difference in this world. But disclaimer alert, this is not a story about me becoming a US diplomat. This is actually a story about how I figured out how to enact change, where I was during that time in my life with the resources and tools that I had then. What I discovered was that I didn't need to wait 20 or 30 years to become older or wiser or become a career foreign service officer to create the kind of change I was eager to make. In fact, I shifted my focus and interest because not all the issues you care about are evident right away. Sometimes you don't discover them until later, and that's what happened to me. In my freshman year of college, I took my very first environmental issues course. Every time I attended that class, I was shocked. Sometimes I was moved to tears. I learned about sea level rise, that the previous year was becoming the hottest year on record, and the next one would probably follow suit. I learned about coral reefs dying, people migrating from uninhabitable land, and the front lines and those on the front lines of climate change not being heard. And my generation, and yours, having to resign ourselves to dealing with the impacts for the rest of our lives. As you can tell, I got pretty worked up about what I was learning. And that's the first step in effectively advocating for change: learning. When you learn, you enlighten yourself on what's going on, what's happening out there in the world, and the experiences and treatment of different groups of people. You might even begin to wonder, why aren't we doing more? And that's what I asked myself when learning about climate change. Why aren't we doing more about it? Perhaps, though, you don't need to wake up to an entirely new issue. Perhaps what you're learning about, you can directly relate to. You may know those challenges of a particular issue and experienced firsthand the damages it has done. Even then, I encourage you to expand your knowledge and begin to search for solutions. And what a better place to learn and to do that research than right here at UGA. Take advantage of the classes that are going to widen your view on the issues you are interested in, that are going to allow you to see and hear from people with different perspectives and give you an opportunity to research and find potential solutions. And that's what I did when I first started to learn about environmental degradation and climate change. I took advantage of the learning opportunities that were available to me during that time. And because I was hungry to learn more, I tacked on a certificate and then later another degree. When you start to learn about the injustices, the history of human struggle, you realize there needs to be a solution and that you can do something about it.
Now we want you to revisit that change that you identified at the very beginning of our time together. Think about what you're interested in. Brainstorm now about 1 to 2 things that you'd really like to learn or research as it relates to that topic, and write them down. Think about ways that you can gather more information about these things. Destiny shared with us that she took a class, even got another degree. that addressed some of those interests? Can you attend a webinar on campus? Can you find your favorite activists on LinkedIn or Instagram? Take stock of the books, the messages, the podcasts that they are consuming, and reflect those in your spare time. This step is all about pursuing your form of activism in a way that fills your cup and lights you up.
So once you've studied what you can on the issue that you want to work on, and you begin to desire to take action, consider who can support you with your cause. So step number 2 is find support. No grand challenge, no movement was ever accomplished by one person alone. Behind every cause and every challenge are individuals, plural, that have advised, supported, and worked alongside leaders of change. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Mahatma Gandhi, John Lewis, Ida B. Wells, Greta Thunberg, just to name a few, all had or have people that made what they were trying to achieve possible. Your efforts to solve the challenges you see within society will be better accomplished by finding those who can support you. In my own journey, there came a certain point in college where I wanted to do more than just gain more knowledge. I wanted to act, but I needed to find support. So while looking around on campus at the time, I couldn't find any avenues that I could take to act on climate change. I attended conferences about sustainability and seminars discussing the impacts of global warming, and still, I wasn't discovering any outlets to focus my energy on making a difference on this issue. So what did I do? I used Google, and I searched for groups that I could join who were taking action on climate change. And that's when I found Citizens Climate Lobby, a group that would equip me with the knowledge and skills that I have today on building political will and making an impact. Finding other people already working on the issues you care about or joining an organization helps amplify your efforts and allows you to contribute to meaningful work that others may have been doing for years. It may also lead you to solutions you did not know already existed. Support is also important because you may be in a place where what you know about an issue feels so crippling or too overwhelming for you to try to do anything about. I know I certainly felt that way about the issue of climate change. But to avoid these feelings of resignation, you need to find support. You need support to realize you're not alone and that there are so many others working at what you're trying to do. So look for student groups that are working on tackling the issues that you care about, or professors, instructors, or even alumni who can support and mentor you. You might even need to look beyond the arch to the community or even to the national stage, such as I did.
For step number 2, I'd like to now revisit that original change. Brainstorm some ideas of where you might begin looking for this active support that Destiny's talking about. This could look a couple different ways. Maybe first start with brainstorming a list of people you already know that are interested in the same things that you are or have motivation to be an activist in the same way that you do. Expand your list then to include other ideal types of people that you might be looking for or that you'd like to get connected with. Again, can you connect with people on LinkedIn? Can you follow people on Instagram or other social medias? Destiny also mentioned finding a mentor. Think about joining the UGA Mentor Program for an alumni whose interests align with yours. This could be personally, this could be professionally. There are a lot of different mentors out there that you can look into. But step number 2 is really focusing on finding folks that you align with in your chosen professional environment.
So this next step and the previous one are fairly interchangeable. So step number 3 is create a plan and begin to organize. Think about what you're going to do specifically to make the change you want to see happen. With any goal or effort, you need a plan. If you found a group or organization to join, this part might be a little bit easier. Established groups typically already have a mission, a vision, and a structure for tackling an issue in their own way. For example, I was fortunate that when I found CCL, they already had chapters all across the United States, and even some around the world, and over 100,000 volunteers working on advocating for a climate policy solution called Carbon Fee and Dividend. If you desire and are able to, I encourage you to find an organization that aligns with your values, because chances are they've done the work of creating the vast network of people who care about the issue that you do and have a plan to solve the problem. If this is not an option, you need to devise the steps you'll take and the strategies you need to employ to solve the challenge you're undertaking. A good place to start is going back to what you learned and informing your actions by the knowledge and the research that exists. Once you have a plan, think about how you're going to organize others to support you and amplify what you are doing. Who in your friend group, amongst your peers, also care about the cause that you are working on? How can you bring them together to work on making change happen? Can you grow your effort by inviting people from different communities, institutions, or states? So I'll give you an example of the importance of organizing people. The first time I went to our nation's capital to lobby for climate solutions, I was surrounded by hundreds of individuals who were there for the exact same reason. This was one of the most empowering moments in my life. You'll be more effective and energized with the more people you are able to organize around the issues that you care about. There is power in numbers.
All right, so step number 3. Step number 3 is really focused on the internal organization of your thoughts and your goals. During step number 3, an activity that you can challenge yourself to do is scheduling time to create a mission, a vision, or a value statement, and then spend an entire day committing to this mission, vision, values. Make it your personal brand. Do your best to make all of your decisions that day based upon it and see what you're able to accomplish.
So what's next once you've gained a deeper understanding of the issue you care about? Once you've found your support, have a plan, and know how to organize others to help in your efforts? Well, that next step is taking action and advocating for a solution. From my experience, the most effective groups, individuals, or causes that end up being successful are those with a solution. As part of your action plan, have a solution. I know I've mentioned this again and again, but you can't expect people to jump on board with and also sustain their interest if you're not working toward a tangible goal. In a world filled with argument and debate over fact and fiction, having a solution allows you to cut across distraction and gets you to laser in on what you're trying to achieve. Once you've identified that solution, you'll need to resolve the issue that you're going to use to resolve that issue you're working on. Think about the actionable steps you can take. And remember, the actions you come up with are ones you do not have to do alone. Bring your friends, your peers, and your community along. I started volunteering with CCL my junior year in college. I had to get over a bit of a learning curve at first to familiarize myself with their solution and organizational structure and mission. But I found that the way that they organized and took action was extremely effective. And I'm going to share their framework with you tonight on how you can take action so that you too can model it if you would like. So, CCL uses what it calls 5 levers of political will. And these are the ways that CCL advocates for its solution. 1, they organize and develop a supportive base of volunteers who are willing to advocate for climate change policies in their solution. They do this by developing chapters in every single voting district across the U.S. and gaining support abroad. 2, they use grassroots outreach to gain support and to educate communities about the issue, as well as their solution that they offer. 3, they use grass-tops engagement to secure support or endorsements from businesses, religious groups, and community leaders. 4, CCL uses media to spread more awareness about the cause and the solution and use it in a way to interact with key individuals. And 5, and probably the thing that drew me into this organization the most, is that they lobby. They lobby their local officials, their members of Congress, and they speak to them about their issue and offer them their solution to mitigate the challenge. The mission of CCL is to develop the political will for a more livable world and to empower individuals to participate in democracy. And it is through these 5 levers of political will that they are able to accomplish this. When you're starting out, your actions may not be as clearly defined, nor will you necessarily find that each of these types of actions are applicable to your cause and your solution. So, determine the steps and types of actions that you will need to take to achieve your mission, and then take them.
After step 4 encourages you to look externally. In order to take action and advocate for a solution, you're going to need to define your audience. Who are the people that absolutely need to know about and hear about this issue that's heavy on your mind? Take this moment to brainstorm 1 or 2 ways that you can get this information in front of them. Maybe even consider one of the 5 levers of change that Destiny just shared with us.
All right. So you might find that there are several actions that you can take to advocate for your solution. And you might try to do these all by yourself. But to avoid feeling overwhelmed or reaching burnout, you must learn to delegate. Delegation is one of the most important things you can do in whatever it is that you're doing, not just positive activism and advocacy work. It will make you more effective and get you closer to achieving your goal. The way that CCL does this, like any other business or organization, is through their structure. As I mentioned before, they have chapters all across the U.S. and every state working to educate their districts and communities about their solution. Within those chapters, you have individuals working specifically on lobbying or gaining endorsements, and others working on community outreach. This is how they delegate. I worked as the Southeast Regional Fellow for CCL for a little over a year, and I was charged with educating colleges and universities about the organization and the CCL solution. I managed outreach across 9 different states. This was definitely a challenge for me. It was a lot of work, and at times it felt overwhelming. But it was important work for me, and I definitely wanted to accomplish it. I was laying the foundation of higher education climate action outreach throughout the Southeast. And one way I made the work that I was doing more impactful was by finding others to delegate outreach to. Part of my job was discovering students who wanted to become campus leaders and start their own campus chapter or their own carbon pricing campaigns. With their help, we could more easily organize our efforts in their towns and communities. And the added benefit was that these students knew their communities best and had their own ties and networks that they were able to engage to add to our growing volunteer base. So, delegate your outreach, your community engagement, your media relations, whatever is not best serving your energy. You won't be able to do it alone, so don't.
In step 5, we want to acknowledge that the burnout is real. This is a very real challenge when it comes to not only advocacy work, but probably every other position you're going to find yourself in the very near future and in the extended future. As a student, as a professional, maybe even as a friend or just as a human being. It's highly unlikely that you find any job or career that you are energized by 100% of your daily duties. So I want you to take this time to identify your burnout skills. How we identify those is the skills that you're really good at, but you really don't like to do. For example, my personal burnout skill, number 1, working with data. I can do it. I'm okay with it. Something as soon as I open an Excel spreadsheet, I get really frustrated. So this is something that I always look to hand off to a colleague or ask a colleague to maybe help me through the process so that the burnout is a little bit less. In our second to last step, we want to do everything we can to burn on and not out, and delegation is a really strategic way to do this.
So we've come to our final step. And our 6th step on our list is arguably one of the most important, and it's building relationships. And though this shows up last, this by no means indicates that you are doing this as the very last step. If you are successful in making progress on the cause that you're working on, you're building relationships all along the way. But here, I'm going to focus on building relationships with people you might not normally consider forming relationships with. When I joined CCL, I had never really advocated for anything, let alone thought much about advocating for policy solutions or speaking directly to people in positions of power. When I learned that CCL volunteers regularly talked with and met with their members of Congress, I was surprised. I never considered myself reaching out to elected officials and meeting with them. But when I started volunteering, I was definitely out of my comfort zone. But luckily, I stuck around. And because I did, I found where the magic happens with building relationships with unlikely individuals. It wasn't easy at first, but as with anything, the more you practice, the better you get. And not long after I started volunteering at CCL, I found my way into the role as the chapter's liaison, meaning I'd schedule meetings with our member of Congress, I'd share information when appropriate with their office, and I'd be the point person to build a relationship between our chapter and our member of Congress and their staff. Though we had an idea of where our congressman stood on the issue, we didn't let it deter us. And this is where positive activism and advocacy come into play. We understood that we might struggle to get our elected official to support our cause and our solution. But we tried and are still trying anyways. And they still agreed to meet with us. Why? Because no matter who you are meeting with or who we were meeting with, in a government office or at a community event, we approach people generously and are sure to show appreciation, gratitude, and respect. When you listen, when you work to find common values, are honest and firm, and endeavor to understand that there is a place, and endeavor to understand your own biases, people listen and they're willing to work with you again and again. We know that there is a place for protests, but an approach that builds consensus will bring enduring change. That's why elected officials and their staff, no matter their politics, say that they are happy to meet with us and meet with CCL volunteers. And they mean it. And it's because we are willing to build an honest relationship. This approach has proven to be successful. So CCL was founded in 2007 with a handful of volunteers and a simple, elegant, but effective solution. And over the years, the organization expanded and community awareness and support grew for the solution. In 2016, CCL helped to start a bipartisan climate solutions caucus in Congress for both the House and the Senate that brought Republicans and Democrats together to discuss climate change and policy solutions. If we were all in a room together today, I would ask you to raise your hand to see how many of you would have thought that that would have ever happened. This laid the groundwork for future collaboration on climate change solutions. And in 2018, Congress introduced the first bipartisan carbon pricing bill in over a decade. And it was the solution CCL championed for so many years. I remember exactly where I was in that moment. I was in DC, riding on a train. I was grinning from ear to ear. I was ecstatic. This was one of the first times I felt I was part of something much larger than myself, and that what I was doing, what we all were doing, was paying off and working. Since then, the bill has been reintroduced, and it continues to add co-sponsors and community support with over 1,500 endorsements from prominent individuals, businesses, faith groups, local governments, and nonprofit organizations. I might even be so bold to say it paved the way for the introduction of many more climate policies within Congress. Whatever cause or issue that you want to change the world on, remember to build relationships. It's a highly effective way to hold people accountable and to get them to support your efforts, especially if that relationship is built out of respect, appreciation, and gratitude.
So Destiny's already explained the importance of step number 6. Relationship building is a very highly sought after skill by employers of all sizes, types, and across every single industry. Oftentimes, we talk to students about how complex relationship building really is, and how it takes so much more than being simply extroverted or charismatic or a good conversationalist. In step number 6, take a couple minutes and reflect on your individual strengths and how you can utilize them to leverage those relationships. Another personal example I can give is my skill of active listening. Consider myself a strong relationship builder. By no means am I charismatic. By no means do I consider myself extroverted. However, as an active listener, as a good listener, I can ask questions, I can hear what's going on, I can get to know someone in order to prioritize a win-win outcome for them. So Destiny, I'm dying to know. Tell us if Gandhi prevailed when he told General Smuts that he was going to win with his help.
Bree, he most certainly did.
By Gandhi's courage, refusal to take undue advantage, and by his endless capacity for resiliency, Gandhi managed to win the general's respect and friendship. In 1914, the most offensive laws to Indians were repealed and basic civil rights were achieved. Jan Smuts' history is well documented, but let me share something that is a little bit less known about the man himself. It is a common misconception that Jan Smuts and Mahatma Gandhi's relationship was one of animosity. Both men actually respected each other and remained lifelong admirers of one another. Gandhi tried at all times to look for the positive in Smuts and said of him that he had a high place among the politicians of the British Empire and even of the world. And famously, when Gandhi finished his work in South Africa, he gifted General Smuts a pair of his handmade sandals. Jan Smuts wore the sandals every single summer at his farm, and then returned the sandals to Gandhi on his 70th birthday, writing, "I have worn these sandals for many a summer, even though I may feel I am not worthy to stand in the shoes of so great a man." Smuts went on to say that it was his fate to be the antagonist of a man for whom, even then, he had the utmost respect.
Now, it's your turn. So learn about the issue that you care about. Do your research. Find support. Create a plan and organize people who can help you take those actions to the next level. Take those actions and advocate for a solution. Delegate and build relationships. You might surprise yourself, maybe even the world. Thank you.
That concludes our lecture. We're going to go ahead and transition into the Q&A portion of the night. So our first question from the audience is, how do we as students get help making a positive change in our community within politics?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so as I referenced earlier, it's good to find support in finding your peers, your friends who are also interested in the same issues that you care about. I know right here in Athens, Clarke County, you are able to go to the mayor and commission meeting. They happen, I think, every Tuesday evening. And I know they're probably doing them virtual now, but those are opportunities for you to take 2 to 3 minutes to share your concerns, to share about what you care about in the community. So that would be one way. You can also email your commissioner, your representative, and talk to them and ask them to listen to you about that issue. They're serving you, they're there for you, and I think it's just not very well known that you have that access to them. So definitely take advantage of that ability to reach out, to have them hear your voice.
Next question. If I am a student leader that does not have a following with my student body, how do I win their trust? Mm-hmm. Another great question. Yeah. One thing that I would say in response to this question is really focus on that step number 6 that we shared, build those relationships. Think about finding common ground, think about how you can ask questions to get to know them, maybe on a little bit of an individual basis also. That common ground is what's going to build that trust and strengthen that relationship.
All right, our next question. What is the best way to delegate to students of different backgrounds and ethnicities without being demanding? This is a good one. And I think you do have to be careful about the way that you ask people to help you do the work. And I think it really just stems from making sure that the people who you're surrounding yourself with are the people who are agreeing to work with you, who care about that cause. And typically, they're going to be self-motivated to do that work anyways. And so it shouldn't be a hard ask. It should definitely be something where you can consider what that person is already doing, what their background, what their strengths are, to be able to delegate things to them, tasks for them to do that maybe are beneficial to their personal and professional development, and things that they are willing to take on.
Our next question from the audience says, I am an extremely shy individual, but I am a very hard worker and good at my job. How do I get comfortable with being uncomfortable and conquering my shyness?
I love this question because, believe it or not, I am definitely an introvert. I am very shy. I was definitely the student who never rose their hand. I didn't speak up or anything like that. And it's hard. It's definitely hard to push yourself out of your comfort zone. But I think when you care so deeply about an issue or a cause, you kind of give yourself no other choice. I think you reach a threshold where you just feel like you can't just continue to sit at the sidelines. You can't continue to wait for other people to make the next step, to take the next move. And so I think it's just a matter of you reaching that point, that threshold maybe, where you're like, I just can't not do anything about it. But I think just taking small steps too. So if for you it's uncomfortable to talk, let's say, just for an example, talk with an elected official or talk with, let's say, administrator or a teacher or professor, maybe just starting with emailing them, having a phone call. Sometimes that's a good way to start. But also just like looking at your friends, asking them for advice on ways that they're able to connect with others and kind of break outside of their shell. And also, when you surround yourself with people that you're comfortable with, it is a little bit easier to step outside of that shyness and your comfort zone.
Next question, how do I, as an incoming professional, network to be a more successful employee? Fabulous question. There's a lot of different ways to do this. I'd say number one, really think about who is going to strategically help you get to where you want to go, okay? One way to do this, especially in the virtual space that we're living in right now, create a LinkedIn account. Start connecting with alumni, start connecting with peers, start connecting with professors, maybe even people you've worked with outside of the university in the past, and see what they're doing. See what they're up to. Don't be afraid to also reach out and message those people. Okay, if you know someone that's doing something that you're kind of interested in, or you could maybe see yourself doing something similar down the line, set up a Zoom call with them. Set up a phone call, 30 minutes. Ask them about how they got there. Ask them about their journey, and ask them if they have any advice. One piece of saying we say in the Career Center quite often is, if you ask for a job, you'll get advice. But if you ask for advice, you may get a job. So that's one strategic way I think that you can start building your network.
So our next question, what can you do to not feel disenchanted when you see you are not convincing stakeholders about what you're doing outreach for? Yes, this is definitely one of those questions that it gets challenging for sure. So I think you have to know that it takes time. It takes time to build a consensus. It takes time to convince people and talk to them so that they can understand what you're trying to do. And so I think just having other people too, that again, going back to delegating, maybe you just need to take a break from some of that outreach that you're doing, have someone else do it. Maybe it's researching and finding other ways to advocate and do outreach for other people. Yeah, I think those are probably the best ways to go about trying to avoid maybe that burnout or feeling disencouraged about doing outreach and feeling like no one's hearing you. But there are people who are hearing you. It just takes time.
And the last question, how do you pull in or find others to join your team who are equally as committed to a goal that you have? Another great question. I think something here that Destiny's mentioned a couple times, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be a little bit of a process. You're going to have to get out there. You're going to have to meet people. You're going to have to chat. And you're going to have to ask questions. build those relationships, and really put some work into a long-term project.
Any other questions? All right. I think that's
Fabulous questions. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. It was really a pleasure to be here.
Thank you all so much.